President Trump's lawyer now has said that the tape is exculpatory and bolsters his client's argument. And last night, while on Fox, he denied that the president did anything wrong.
This is, at most, an attempt to do something. I don't know of any attempt in this category of crime that they're looking at. So, in any event, I don't think anyone can suggest that this represents anything where the president did anything wrong.
Well, let me suggest it. Anyway, the president lashed out at Cohen this morning, tweeting, "What kind of a lawyer would tape a client? So sad. Is this a first? Never heard of it before. Why was the tape so abruptly terminated? Cut. Why was presumably saying positive things? I hear there are other clients and many reporters that aren't taped. Can this be so? Too bad." After a meeting with the president of the European Commission today, Trump avoided taking any questions from the press. Let's watch. This is a press conference with no press questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Did Michael Cohen betray you?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. President, are you worried about what Michael Cohen is going to say to prosecutors? Are you worried about what is on the other tapes, Mr. President?
What a press briefing on the Rose Garden. In fact, the president took no questions there either. Anyway, CNN is reporting now that the reporter who asked them a question was summoned to Bill Schein's office. That's the former co-president of Fox News and current deputy chief of staff for communications at the White House. While there, she was informed that she would be barred from attending a press availability in the Rose Garden because her questions, quote, were inappropriate for the venue and because she was shouting. It's a common practice, of course, for pool reporters to ask questions in that setting. For more, I'm joined by Betsy Woodruff, politics reporter for the Daily Beast. Paul Butler, a former federal prosecutor, and Ken Delaney, an intelligence and national security reporter for NBC News. Well, let's talk about this, Ken, about this. So we hear the President of the United States talking about making a payoff to this company that owns the National Enquirer for $150,000. The purpose of the payoff is apparently to keep the story from printed, but they make it to take it out of the hands of Karen McDougal, who said she had the relationship with Trump, get her to give up her story, give up rights to using it, but giving it to anybody else so that they can kill the story. And doing it within months of the presidential election that fall when he's a candidate for president, to kill the story, to kill the bad news, to protect him as a candidate. And all that, what's the significance of all this beyond the sneakiness of the whole thing?
Well, the first significance, Chris, is that the White House lied about it. When this first came out, Hope Hicks said that Donald Trump knew nothing about this payment, but this tape clearly shows that he was aware of it. They even talked about the idea that the president of this company, David Pecker, could get hit by a bus and might change his mind about owning the rights to this woman's story. So therefore, they had to consider buying the rights themselves. The second issue here is whether this amounts to a campaign finance violation. And this tape is not dispositive on that point. But Lanny Davis, Michael Cohen's lawyer, said in an interview with NBC News that he believes that's what happened here, that this was a payment made to squelch a story that was dangerous to Donald Trump's election, that it wasn't accounted for properly, that it could be a campaign finance violation, the same way John Edwards, the former senator, was charged with felonies. Now, Edwards was acquitted, but this fact pattern is much more incriminating because this payment was made right before the election, and Michael Cohen seems prepared to testify that it was about protecting Trump.
Well, in those days with John Edwards, he was getting help from Bunny Mellon, a wealthy woman, one of the wealthiest people in the world, basically, who paid for the payoff, what's her name, his filmographer, I think was her title, and kept her relationship quiet with him. But there's a case where if Trump did all this and he's paying money to shut up somebody, to Karen McDougal, to help his campaign, yes, it's a campaign contribution, you could argue, but it's him contributing to his own campaign, which under Buckley-Valeo, a constitutional ruling, you're allowed to give all the money in the world if you own it to your own campaign. So how's that square with it being a violation?
Well, because you have to account for those contributions, because the law says the public has a right to know who's giving, even if it's you, the candidate, and how much you gave. But you're right, Chris. Look, the bottom line is, if this is all they ever get on Donald Trump, this is, someone would call this a kind of a chicken feed, would use a different word, charge against the President of the United States. Nonetheless, if there was a criminal conspiracy here to violate campaign finance laws, that could end up being an important situation.
Paul, you know, I guess times have changed under Trump, and not for the better. We have defined deviancy way down. I guess there was a time when we all be thrilled actually in a negative way, to hear that the President of the United States was on the phone with his fixer lawyer talking about paying off a woman because he had an affair that he was afraid she'd go public with. That used to be big news before Trump. I mean, Go back to Clinton, go back to, I don't know, Kennedy, wherever. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked to know this kind of thing has happened in the past if it did. But I would be shocked we had a tape of it. We could hear the president's own voice talking about funding. I mean, he's actually talking about cash and versus checks. And it's all the details of a sort of a criminal conspiracy. Your thoughts?
It's really shady. It's really unseemly. It's probably legal on the part of Trump if all he's doing is paying hush money to people like Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels. That's not against the law. As Ken said, what would be a criminal issue is if this is in fact to aid the campaign, which the tape makes fairly clear it is, then it should have been reported.
How does it make it look like in the tape we were listening to just now, the whole tape, that it was a campaign contribution to shut her up? It would hurt his chances in winning the election.
Because they're very concerned about the period before the election. Cohen is clearly now an agent of the campaign. He's no longer just Mr. Fix-It and Mr. Trump's lawyer. He's making representations on behalf of the campaign. The other thing that's really got to worry President Trump is the way that other members of the Trump organization have been brought in now. Alan Weisselberg, who was the CFO of the Trump organization, he's implicated in trying to set up this shell corporation, as well as the CEO of AMI, which is National Enquirer's holding company. Again, both of these people may not only have exposure for conspiracy to violate the campaign law, but they can open up a whole Pandora's box to the Trump organization's finances. We're pretty sure President Trump does not want a prosecutor to go anywhere near his finances.
You're the best, Paul. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on this program. According to the New York Times, federal authorities have to come to believe that AMI, that's the company that owns the National Enquirer, acted more as a political supporter than as a news organization. It was not functioning under what campaign finance law calls a legitimate press function. They were contributing basically by helping Trump out. That could create legal and political challenges for the president. David Pecker, the chairman of the CEO of AMI, that's the holding company of the National Enquirer, is a close friend of the president and also of Michael Cohen. Sources tell the Wall Street Journal that when Pecker took over at AMI in the late 1990s, he imposed a moratorium on negative stories, catch this, about Mr. Trump. No bad news on Donald Trump, his friend. Sources also tell the paper that throughout the 2016 presidential campaign, AMI would privately communicate, quote, to bolster the candidate and bash his opponents. Let me go to Betsy on this. A couple of things. Tradecraft journalism. If you get a tape recording from somebody, and then from their adversary in the fight, so you get the tape recording from Lanny Davis, who's working for Michael Cohen. They get it handed like they did to CNN the other day. Or you get a transcript of it. Which one would you think was really being forthright? Because I keep remembering Nixon. Nixon tried to give a big pile of transcripts, but it heavily redacted his version of the word. But you give the tape out, it seems like you're giving more closer to the truth. Your thoughts?
I think without a doubt, it's a lot easier to sort of doctor or mess around with a transcript, something typed up, than it is with audio. That's not to say you can't doctor audio.
Unintelligible when you don't like a line or two.
Exactly. That's not to say you can't doctor audio. And of course, there are parts of this tape that are hard to understand.
Was it edited as you heard it?
I don't have any knowledge that it was edited.
I've heard it was, but go ahead.
I don't have reason to believe that. I can't speak to it. But of course, if you're trying to project confidence, releasing a tape, releasing audio recordings is much stronger than releasing a transcript. The fact that Rudy Giuliani is talking about needing to slow things down or look at this official transcript, it doesn't look great.
Well, we're big people here, boys and girls, all grown up. We're used to hearing the politicians are not saints. Okay, move on. What do you think that most Americans would think when they hear the way the president's talking to his fixer lawyer in this conversation? It's comfort with the conversation.
What's striking is how cavalier the president's tone is in this audio. He talks about paying off a tabloid company to try to cover up a story related to his alleged affair with a former Playboy playmate, like he's talking about setting up a golf outing. Like
you said alleged. He doesn't think it's alleged.
That's right.
He knows it happened, apparently.
But he talks about it like it's just sort of another average day in the life of Donald Trump, paying off tabloids not to run stories that could potentially be mortifying to you and to your family. And I think that's what makes this audio so striking and so significant is that it just speaks to the way that Trump did business, the way that he handles these issues that for just about anybody else would be extraordinarily controversial. I mean, imagine if President Obama had had something like
I
this
say it
happen.
all
There would
the
have been
time.
impeachment.
He would have been gone. If he behaved like this president, it wouldn't have been close call by his enemies. Reince Priebus, the ousted former chief of staff to Trump, dismissed the recordings as nothing special and had this glowing take on his former boss.
I was one of the people that would freak out over every one of these kinds of stories. And over time, what I figured out with the president is that nothing sticks to him. None of this sticks. And what I found about his character is that he is a person who's able, which I am not one of these kinds of people, that can handle 50
Incoming.
total, massive, bullets coming at you.
Well, I don't want you to be a media critic, Ken, because that's not your role here. Neither is it mine. But there he is on a network, a cable network, where they're bragging together about how good he is at avoiding responsibility for behavior that most other people would be held accountable for. They're raving about his sneakiness, how he can sneaks by and doesn't get caught. That's supposedly a journalistic conversation. Aren't they great? We can't catch them.
And the irony is, one of the reasons nothing sticks to him is because he has a whole right-wing media apparatus that tells you black is white every night. But look, I think, what's interesting about the tapes is, as we saw with the Nixon-Watergate situation, Nixon might have survived Watergate if not for the tapes. The tapes were this sort of brutal, unvarnished machinations in the Oval Office. Now, depending on how many tapes there are in this situation with Michael Cohen and Donald Trump, it may start to affect how some of these middle-of-the-road people who don't want to believe what we say, how they start to look at how this president behaves. Chris.
I agree. By the way, Nixon set up his own Frankenstein's monster. He set up the tapes.
Yep.
I'm sure he thought about the rest of his life. Why did I tape myself? In this case, it was the lawyer fixer who was preparing himself for whatever he did, but it ended up today being here on television, the tapes of the backroom machinations of one Donald Trump sneaking around. Thank you, Betsy Woodruff. Thank you, Paul Butler. I said you're the great one. Thank you, Ken. I'm so glad we have you. Ken Delaney and working with NBC. Coming up.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.